In this video, we're continuing our look at the Middle-earth Role-Playing Game 2nd Edition, and we're learning how to take actions and how to fight. Then you've got character levels and advancement, and then how to perform actions. Moving. Distance moved in feet equals normal movement rate plus encumbrance penalty plus maneuver result minus 100. Oh, when you're trying to run. Static maneuvers. So this is one of the charts right here that helped you determine whether or not you succeeded on some type of maneuver roll. So we've got a general table right here, a table or a column for interaction and influence, for disarm, trap, and pick lock, and then static maneuvers for read, rune, and use item, and then perception and tracking, which are skills we saw on the character sheet in the beginning. So this is what you're going to be rolling on over here. So you roll a D100, and then you subtract or add your skill level with whatever it is that you're working on, and then plus or minus the difficulty levels. And so you could end up with something that's very low or something that's very high. And actually, I believe that most of these rolls are open-ended, which means that if you roll really well on the die, then it explodes, and then you roll again, and then you add these two together. So I think that happens in this situation, and that explains why, even though we're only rolling a D100, we've got greater than 175 here, we've got less than 25 right here, and we go from blunder, which is some type of fumble, absolute failure, failure, partial success, near success, success, and absolute success. So let's just see what is, if you're trying to disarm a trap, and you are met with absolute failure, you develop a mental block on this lock or trap. Further attempts to pick or disarm it will fail. There's a 50% chance the trap will activate, including picking a lock with an attached trap. So what if you just completely blunder trying to pick a lock? So blunder. If picking a lock, the lock pick is broken and stuck in the lock, rendering it unopenable until removed. This requires someone other than you to successfully pick the lock. Any traps connected to it are set off. If disarming a trap, the trap is activated. Near success is you almost had it. You spend 2 rounds thinking about your attempt, no other activity. You may try again with an extra +5 bonus. Success. On a success, it says this lock trap is picked, disarmed, +50 on any future attempts to pick, disarm this lock and trap. Absolute success. In the future, you may automatically pick, disarm, takes 1 round, this lock, trap, or any identical lock or trap. +10 to attempts on future locks and traps. So yeah, so difficulty modifiers over here, in all cases, +30 is routine. If something's routine, you get +30 all the way through absurd, which is -70. Yeah, here's the reference to an open-ended roll on the moving maneuver table. I saw something about definitions early on, just so we know how they're handling open-ended rolls. Well, I don't have open-ended roll here. Ha! Can't ever find exactly what you're looking for. I do have roll. In MERP, 2 differently colored 10-sided dice are used to resolve any activity requiring a roll. Such dice are available in most hobby and toy stores. Each of these dice is just how to roll a D100. Well, I'm sure that open-ended rolls are in here someplace then. I found it in the very beginning on page 18, an open-ended roll. Many 1 to 100 rolls are open-ended. Most of the time, open-ended rolls yield a result between 1 and 100, but sometimes they yield results that are less than 1 or greater than 100. Some common open-ended rolls are attack rolls, maneuver rolls, orientation rolls, perception rolls, resistance rolls, and encounter rolls. Rolls that are not open-ended include critical strike rolls, stat rolls, and rolls to learn spell lists. If a roll is open-ended, an initial 1 to 100 roll of over 95 calls for a second 1 to 100 roll to be made and added to the first roll. If the second roll is also over 95, a third roll is made and added to the sum of the first 2 results. This process is continued until a roll under 96 occurs. The total obtained by this process is the result of the open-ended roll high. Theoretically, there is no limit to how big such a roll could go. An initial 1 to 100 roll under 6 calls for a second 1 to 100 roll to be made and subtracted from the first roll. If the second roll is over 95, a third roll is made and subtracted from the total of the first 2 results. This process is continued until a roll under 96 occurs. The total obtained by this process is the result of the open-ended roll low. Theoretically, there is no limit to how small the total of such a roll could go. Attack rolls. So here we have fumble arms, or excuse me, here we have hand arms fumble table, and here we have slash critical table as example. And this is the attack table for one-handed slashing weapons attack table. So, you know, I've talked about this, I believe, also in that video series where we're talking about realism and RPG combat. So this is, I think, one of the things that I like is that it has the right number of categories, or a potentially good number of categories. So one-handed slashing weapons, that's just its own category. And then it uses the armor categories: plate, chain, rigid leather, soft leather, and none. And so you've got the interaction of one-handed slashing weapons, but not weapons down to any other level of granularity, and then how they interact with those particular types of armor, but not any greater level of granularity, and then you've got a particular table for that. But once again, table reference like this isn't really something that we do a lot in modern role-playing games anymore. So attacks. Here's our summary of how to make an attack. Attacker makes an open-ended attack roll. If an unmodified result is obtained, proceed to step 4. The result is not modified by anything. So an unmodified result, I think that had to do with like a fumble. Oh yeah, so here is unmodified on the one-handed slashing weapons table. So you've got like a sword, and you roll a 1 to 8 unmodified, then there is a possible chance of fumble. If you don't roll that, you roll outside of that, then I suppose you apply all of your modifications and then figure out what it is that you rolled. So all applicable modifications are made to the roll if after you've determined that you have not rolled an unmodified result. A couple of things kind of skipped over in the summary here is that, for instance, not all rolls of 1 to 8 with single-handed slashing weapons result in a fumble. The fumble ranges for individual weapons are different. That's why the range of 1 to 8 is a possible fumble. You need to consult your weapon. And then two of the most significant modifications to the attack roll are the attacking character's offensive bonus, which is on the character sheet, and the target's defensive bonus. The modified roll is applied to the appropriate attack table. The result may require a roll on a second table. So an attack may have several results depending on the attack roll, modified or unmodified. These results include hits, fumbles, failures, and criticals, and resistance roll modifications. So let's look at hits. I think that's basic hit point damage, hits. The number result on all of the attack tables, like this one right here, 3, 4, 5, whatever, indicates the number of hits delivered to the target. Fumbles and failures. If an attack roll results in an F, the attack has fumbled or failed, and a roll must be made on one of the fumble and failure tables. A fumble failure roll is only modified by one of the special modifiers listed on the bottom of the table being used. A fumble failure roll is only modified by one of the special modifiers listed on the bottom of the table being used. For example, weapon fumbles are only modified by weapon type, spell failures are only modified by spell class. Critical strikes. A letter, A, B, C, D, or E, indicates that target has been given one or more critical strikes, criticals or crits. The type and number of critical depends on the type of weapon being used. So over here, if you're using a one-handed slashing weapon and you roll a 115, and you're fighting somebody in chain armor, you do 12 hits worth of hit point damage and a B critical. And so yes, the E criticals are the worst ones, because we see here when we roll on the critical tables, A critical is modified by -20, a B critical is modified by -10, all the way to E criticals, which are modified by +20. So the E criticals are the worst ones. If the target takes a critical result that lasts for a certain number of rounds, so to determine the result of the critical, a second roll, not open-ended, is made and applied to the appropriate critical table. This roll is only modified by a bonus based on the severity of the critical. Okay, so non-open-ended, only modified by critical severity. If the target takes a critical result that lasts for a certain number of rounds, and he has not yet performed an action for the current round counts as one of the rounds affected by the result. And we can have some number of hits. We can have some number of hits per round, like they're bleeding. We can stun them. We can give a penalty to their activity as different possible critical results. Resistance roll modifications, spell attacks, restrictions, missile pairing, range, and reloading. Actually, in some strange way, this is making me want to run the combat of this, because it is old school. I think that you would have to come through and strip out some things in order to make it more Tolkien-like. But, you know, I kind of want to go through and do a series where we play through different scenarios using different combat systems for different role-playing games, just to see what they're like and to compare and contrast, basically trying to learn from a whole bunch of different systems. And I think it would be fun to play something out using this. And I think we ought to try to come up with something that's similar, that can be played across a lot of them, like, dwarves or elves fighting goblins, or, the fighting the wolves here would also be fun. But I think that you would want the enemy to also have weapons, so it wouldn't just be wolves. This game does have facing, and see, I was used to dealing with things like facing early on in role-playing. I like this picture of the dwarves here. I like the dwarves in their mail here. Dwarves sparring on the practice floor. Then the section for the game masters. Strategic movement rate table, transport type, terrain type. Now, I also like this kind of thing because I like being able to have hex grids like world maps or regional maps, really, for overland movement, and for the characters to be able to figure out, how long they're going to be going or how long it's going to take them to get someplace based on, what are they doing? Sneaking, careful walk, normal walk, jog, walk, slow ride, fast ride, versus road, open ground, forest, rough and forest, mountainous. Different categories like that. Now, overland movement's also something I think we should totally do a complete video series on. Encounter table right here. I remember this because you're talking about population density. When your players are moving through a particular area, we've got population density, dense, moderate, light, sparse, and wasteland. Your encounter roll, and then activity of inhabitants. Plus 25 if hostile, plus 50 if a patrolled area, plus 100 if hue and cry. So I've used that a lot in RPGs and maybe even some fiction. Maybe I've used that term. I'm not sure yet. But it comes up in my mind a lot. The enemy is hue and cry. Traveling at night, and then you come up with some type of encounter that you might have. Searching for herbs. So here's the section on magic and spells. And we are going to come up with spell lists here, so we can see how that works or how it does not work. Brief section on religion, injury, death, and healing. Injuries. So how can we die here? We got several different ways to die. Death can be immediate death. If an injury occurs which causes the character to die immediately, this is usually the result of a critical strike from attack. So if you get hit with a severe enough critical, you're out of there. Excessive hits. If a character receives more hits than the sum of his body development hit total and his constitution stat, the soul will depart after 6 rounds. If someone heals enough of these hits before the 6 rounds are up to drop the total sum under the mentioned above, the death will not occur due to excessive hits. Death after a number of rounds. Certain injuries indicate that a character will die after a number of rounds pass. If such an injury is healed before the rounds have passed, the character will not die. Special. Certain special spells or occurrences may lead directly to death. For example, Gollum when he fell into the cracks of doom. Oh, okay. Yes, that would kill you outright. Healing, natural healing and first aid, so hits for every 1 hour of resting, and every 3 hours if not resting, you get back 1 hit. A bandage and compress will stop 1, 2, or 3 hits per round, or reduce the hits per round wounded by 3. This effect will continue only if the character does not do more than walk during the next 8 hours. The hits per round start again if he does more than walk. A tourniquet will stop 4 to 10 hits per round from a limb wound. Until the wound is healed, the tourniquet must be loosened once every 24 hours, at which time the character takes 3 hits per round for 5 rounds. If the tourniquet is not loosened, the limb will be lost. Healing with spells, we've got preservation, life-keeping, life-giving. Healing with herbs, stat deterioration table, round after death. So I guess if you're brought back, you deal with stat deterioration. Recovery table for burn, tissue, bone, muscle, tendon damage, light, medium, and severe, head and internal organs, 2 weeks, 2 months, or varies. Poisons, disease, buying, selling, money. Now, the money in here had mithril piece at the top, gold piece after that, silver piece, bronze piece, copper piece, and then tin piece. So tin, that's Tin, the metal. So 1 copper piece was 10 tin pieces, 1 bronze piece was 10 copper pieces, 1 silver piece is 10 bronze pieces, 1 gold piece is 10 silver pieces, and then 1 mithril piece is 100 gold pieces. We'll stop here for now, but in the next video, we'll look at how to design a character. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please check out the playlists on my YouTube channel. I've got a lot more videos on role-playing games, fantasy, storytelling, and more, all organized by playlist. So just choose a topic you're interested in, click the playlist, and enjoy some videos. I'll see you soon.